Hey, Shaun, and welcome to the show. So good to have you on today.
Hey, thank you very much, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've been excited about this for a while. And as the audience will find out here shortly, that we've known each other quite a long time. So, first things first, let's get right into it. And I'd love if you introduce yourself, where you're at in the world, and just give the audience a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Shaun Newkirk. I'm a senior executive within the experience space. I've worked in a variety of roles for technology companies over the years. And Jason, you and I have known each other for around 20 years now, as hard as that is to
That's
believe.
that's right. That's right. That
And
is a long
I'm
time.
located, it's crazy. And I'm located in the greater Minneapolis, St. Paul area of Minnesota, and have lived here for about 20 years.
Yeah. And where were you prior to Minnesota?
So I was born and raised just outside of Philadelphia. I grew up in South Jersey, and had lived there for the bulk of my life, except college. I went to the University of West Virginia. I'm a mountaineer, um, and moved here for a job in it was 1998. So I've been in Minnesota for a good long time.
Yeah. Philadelphia to Minnesota. It's that two sports teams that have perished from the playoffs here as we're recording this in January.
Yeah, I had one time tallied the number of seasons that my sports teams between the two cities had gone without winning a championship, and the number was very, very large.
Yes.
Thankfully, the Phillies in 2008, and of course the Eagles a couple of years ago have made that number smaller. Thank goodness. But it sure be nice to see one of our Minnesota teams break that curse as well.
Yeah. And of course, as anybody who's a football fan will remember, Philadelphia came to Minnesota after beating Minnesota. They beat Minnesota and then came to Minnesota and beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl in Minnesota, which is just a huge FU in my opinion. But
Yeah,
got to pull it together.
pretty much every other person in the state of Minnesota hates the Philadelphia Eagles, and I can certainly understand why. Um,
Yeah.
but I cheered for both teams, so that I had a 50-50 chance of coming out a winner in that circumstance. So all things ended well, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully they don't play each other again in the playoffs anytime soon, because that was pretty painful.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the way that Shaun know each other is we actually work together at a company called Nextel, which is no longer a company. It was acquired or merged with Sprint in 2005. And so Shaun and I worked together at Nextel starting in 2000. So I started there in August of 2000. I actually started the Monday after the Friday I finished college. So I had no time off because, when you're like 22, you're like, I need to make money. So I didn't take any time off after college, not like what I think a lot of students do now or college graduates do now. So I graduated college on a Friday, started at Nextel on a Monday. And Shaun, I believe you started pretty shortly thereafter. We worked on different teams. I started as a sales rep. I was a young man, and you were a bit older than me. So you actually managed a team there. And that's how we got to know each other and become fast friends ever since. So it's been, like you said, it's been it'll be 20 years and 20 years and I think September that we would have met each other.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, it's incredible. I worked for Nextel after being moved from Philadelphia to Minnesota by a company that was a paging carrier. So,
Hold on. Hey, Shaun, we need to
yeah,
we need to specify for the audience what a paging company
uh,
is.
yeah, I was going to do that. So, yeah, I know a lot of people listening to a podcast probably don't know what a pager or a beeper was, but a small device that you carried around on your hip, that someone could dial a telephone number and it would show a 10-digit telephone number for you to return their phone call to. So that was my beginning in sales and management in technology companies. I actually worked for a retailer, and the gentleman who hired me at the paging company had also worked in retail. Like, I think he managed a Foot Locker, if I remember correctly, before managing a sales team at a paging company, and hired me because he knew coming out of retail, my work ethic would be great. So that
It's
was my
amazing.
entry into the great world of technology. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're like, I could sell you some sneakers, and then I'm going to sell you a pager,
Yep. Yep.
and
So,
it all comes together.
yep.
Funny.
And the company I worked for bought a headquartered company out here in Minnesota. and moved me to Minnesota when I was married. I had a house. I had a 1.5-year-old son. We had never been to Minnesota, didn't know a soul in Minnesota, but it was an opportunity for me to move up in my career and drive more income at the time, and it's worked out. It's worked out pretty damn well for the last 22 or 23 years now that we've been out here and raised our family here.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I know we're going to talk a lot about much more of that as we get through the episode today. So let's get into it. So, Shaun, first question for you. What is something that you nerd out about?
So I nerd out about a couple of different things, but one thing I think that is applicable to the discussion today is I nerd out about connected technology. So having worked in the industries for so long, if you will, if it's something that can be connected to the internet and make your life better, I'm all over it. And, that started way back in paging, but today, in my house, Jason, as you well know,
yes, I've been in Shaun's house.
Jason's been in my house. Jason, we joke around. Jason probably helped me set up my first home Wi-Fi network back when he was a solutions engineer. He became the solution engineer for my home network. So everything from, the things that everybody has now, but whether it's a Nest or, an Alexa or sprinklers that can be managed via Wi-Fi, garage door openers, etc. It's hooked up in my house. And having worked in the industry and seen some of these things prior to commercial release, to now be able to use them in the day-to-day life, I get kind of super excited about that.
Yeah. I think you and I have something in common. I was having a conversation with my friend Marie about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and who's your favorite superhero? And for me, It was so easy that it's Tony Stark for a couple of reasons. One, he's snarky and sarcastic and funny, and actually isn't really a superhero. He doesn't have any superpowers other than he's really good at technology. And even more importantly, he has Jarvis, where, like, how some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm really scared of technology and I'm afraid computers are going to take over the world. I want to wake up in the morning and have a Jarvis and be like, and just tell a robot to do everything for me other than the few things I actually want to do.
Exactly.
Like automate everything sounds phenomenal to me.
Yep. So if I was asked that question, who is my favorite superhero? Certainly Tony Stark, or maybe Batman, because their main superpower is that they're rich, right? But but they also leverage technology in a way that is pretty cool. So I'm right with you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. What's the other thing you nerd out about?
So the other thing that I nerd out about, and it's kind of my hobby and my passion at the same time, is live music. So, and a crossover from live music is collecting posters from different shows that I've attended. So, I am fortunate enough to have a wife who's willing to be dragged along to a variety of live music experiences, and we travel the country, at least the upper Midwest, on a fairly regular basis to go see our favorite bands, and we have a wide variety of tastes when it comes to music, and like to experience it as often as possible and as in many different settings. So it can be an expensive hobby, but we certainly get a great deal of enjoyment out of that.
Yeah. Who have you seen the most? Have you ever counted up to see? I mean, I have an idea who maybe you've seen the most, but
it kind of has varied over the years. So at one point, it certainly would have been Metallica. Which I know you can relate to. So, but they've kind of dropped off a little bit. Over the last few years, I've seen Tool a tremendous amount. And again, I'm not necessarily what the average person might think of as a heavy metal fan. I like to say I'm not an adult. I only play one on TV, right? So
I identify with that.
Exactly. You're only as old as you feel, right? So
that's right.
We've seen Dave Matthews Band a lot. I just put in a ticket request for Pearl Jam, who announced the tour yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited that they've got a new album coming out and they're going to be touring. I'm going to try and get to Denver to see a show. That's about as close as they're coming here. But there's a wide variety of musical tastes that we like to go and see when we get a chance.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about this. And this is an honest question. I have no idea what the answer is. So you have 3 children. So growing up, did you take them to any concerts that you wanted to like poke your ears out, but you went anyway?
I was fortunate enough not to go to those concerts, but my wife did. We won tickets at a charity auction for American Idols, like the first time that concert tour went around.
Oh
And
God.
Terry took the two younger kids to that. Fortunately, I did not have to go to that, but I've tried to make my kids like my musical taste. They don't necessarily, but
Yeah,
the first concert we took our oldest to was U2,
that's
when he was
awesome.
he was like 9, and was sitting on my shoulders because we actually only had 2 seats together. And Bono pointed at him as he was walking around the runway. So for a
Amazing.
he pointed at him and waved at him and stopped. And yeah, so I mean, maybe you should have just quit right there because I'll probably never have a better experience than that. But
Yeah, that's
I've
awesome.
I've taken my kids to a lot of the stuff that I've enjoyed, Paul McCartney and Guns N' Roses and Pearl Jam and stuff. So and they've enjoyed it for
Cool.
the most part. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome. Yeah, I know that's something you guys do as a family. That's something I did not. That is not something that my family did growing up. Not, I don't know. I just don't. I don't think it's not. We didn't go to concerts together, which
Yeah,
is okay. Nothing wrong with it.
I
But yeah,
yeah
would have liked to.
I didn't either. I try and expose your kids to as many different things, and then let them choose what they're passionate about. Right.
Yeah. Well, my daughter Hannah, as I've talked about a lot on the show, she's almost 4. So I feel like we've taken her to Disney on Ice, and living in New York City, you've got, if you go to Times Square, you've got Frozen on Broadway and Aladdin on Broadway, and I think we're getting and Lion King on Broadway. I feel like we're close to where she's going to start paying attention to that stuff, and we're going to need to start taking her to that because it's so available here, and all the concerts come here as well. But
Yeah.
you look at the ticket prices, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, it's insane
Yeah.
what the
It's
tickets cost here.
a little early. I agree. She probably won't quite appreciate it yet, but she'll get there. And there's certain stuff like Disney on Ice and whatnot. But yeah, where you live, you have the opportunity to expose her to a little bit of everything, which is awesome.
Yeah, cool. So, next question for you, Shaun. What is something that is inside your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's?
I think one thing that I've grown very used to that I think a lot of people may not um, be comfortable with is, I've worked in a sales environment or sales structure for the last 25 years of my career, always with a large percentage of my income um, as a variable dependent upon success or failure, right? So, um, to raise a family of 3 and be the primary, breadwinner under those circumstances for that length of time is more and more unique. I think fewer and fewer people probably do that, but it's all
Yeah,
I've ever really known and gotten used to. And what it sounds a little bit canned, but what I'd like to tell people is I'm always willing to bet on myself.
I
If
love
the
that.
opportunity is right and I'm comfortable with the product or services and its place in the marketplace, I'm always willing to bet on myself.
I think, yeah, and that's always been my experience with you as well. And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And for people that are listening that are in sales, I think they can appreciate that. But it is the only thing scarier than working in sales and having a percentage of your income is working for yourself and having a total
Yeah.
variable compensation based on only you doing your thing, which is what I'm experiencing for the first time over the last year. But it is super fun. But yes, that
And
is my
I think that's an extension of it, right? I think someone who's lived in that environment and worked in that environment might be more willing or more likely to go ahead and take that leap, if you will. So yeah, I 100% agree, and that would be outside of my comfort zone at this point, right?
yeah.
So
No, totally.
with kids in college and everything else, that would be something that right now, although someday I would like to, but right now and for the last 15 years, I probably wouldn't have been able to make that change.
Yeah.
So hats off.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're going to flip the script on this question.
Yeah.
What's something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I have sort of a straightforward answer to it, right? I did. I have changed industries, if you will, I I took a leap a little bit in working in an area that was outside of any experience that I had, and that was moving from, let's call it, wireless technology to customer experience. So what I do
Mm-hmm.
today, I help large brands interact with their customers better, and we do it, and I do it in a way that involves both uh, technology, artificial intelligence, and human capital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exciting. It's a grind, but I've learned a tremendous amount of new things in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've also traveled the world, and been to places where I'd never been to before, like India and Philippines and Colombia, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and have done business in those places. So
Yeah.
um, it it it's becoming more of my comfort zone, but certainly for the first 6 months, my head was really spinning.
Yeah, so you've been on this kind of the same path that I went on in 2011, moving from more of a hardware based sales cycle, which is wireless is generally either hardware or like a piece of wireless technology built into hardware, to a
Yep.
pure, you're in a pure software business. Well, software combined with, like you said, the human capital part of it, but you're not selling any pieces of things that people buy anymore and like can actually
No.
touch. It's all
Yeah.
software based, or people. Yeah,
Yep.
that's
It's
super
a com-
cool.
it's a complete change. And the other thing that I changed is I went from working for really well recognized, super top 50 brands in the U.S. to very small, privately held Silicon Valley based companies, with a totally different place in the world, right? So,
Yeah.
where I worked up until the last few years, your brand got you in the door 9 times out of 10, right? So, if you didn't have a relationship with somebody, they would talk to you because of who you worked for. Now it's completely different. You have to really ensure that your value proposition has an impact before you get those types of meetings. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
helped me. It's helped me develop new skills and really continue to learn new things, which is something that does excite me.
Yeah. And you also, and the same journey as me with my tech career, you also realize that your technology actually has to be decent.
Yeah, super important. Yeah,
It's super
super
important that you
important.
actually have something that actually works, or
Yeah,
it works 90% of the time. Is usually good
yeah,
enough in software.
yeah.
Um,
Amen.
yeah. Cool. So next question for you. I know that you do, I mean, you're very comfortable on your feet, obviously spending all your time in all of your career in sales in one way or another, getting on your feet, delivering messages to people is definitely inside your comfort zone. So, what if I was to give you the opportunity to, and I gave you 5 minutes, and you were able to give a speech to the whole wide world? Shaun, what would you give your speech on, and why?
Yeah, um, it's a really interesting way of getting you to think about issues that are bigger than yourself, right? So,
Hmm.
um, there's a variety of issues that uh, would be important to me personally, but on a global basis, I think the message that I would want to try and deliver to people, and it goes a little bit along with some of the questions we're going to talk about later, is just how to treat each other, right? So, um, traveling globally has opened my eyes to how people outside of our country view people in our country and view the United States, and I think a lot of people would be surprised, if you will, about the level of admiration that people globally, especially in emerging countries, have for the United States, have for its people, have for its culture. My speech would probably be something around, treating people with respect, no
Hmm.
matter where they come from, what their point of origin is, what their economic standing is. That everybody has value and um, is just as important as we are. It's super easy living where we do to take for granted a hell of a lot. And,
Yeah.
I just think that message of uh, mutual respect and treating people the right way would really be impactful. I might find a way to do something to talk about um, pollution and global warming, because also traveling to some of these countries,
Hmm.
um, it makes me realize that some other countries are certainly far behind the United States, and we certainly have plenty of work to do. But when it comes to impact on the climate, I think we all kind of need to get moving here, or it's not going to work out real well in the end.
Yeah. A question for you on your the speech and the topic of the speech specifically around treating everybody with respect. Is that something that that you see that you've instilled in your children, and that they can operate from that same place? I mean, and the reason I ask this is obviously I know Shaun's family. Both two of your three children are in college right now, specifically doing degrees that are all what I would call helper, like helping professions. So I'm like, do
Yep.
you think that you and Terry, your wife, have instilled that in your children, that they operate in that same methodology in the world, or kind of see the
I
world in the same way?
I hope so. We've certainly tried to. It's not easy to go through every day with that mindset 100% of the time, but we've tried very hard with our kids from a very young age to try and have that approach to the world, and I think it has had an impact. And I think beyond what they do for a living, more who they are as people, I think they do reflect that, and that's something we're extremely proud of.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's been my experience. Your family is lovely people, as I'm sure already know that I think about them and you
Yeah,
and
I,
everybody else.
I appreciate that, man. Yep.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
So we've talked a little bit about this, Shaun, but this is the part of the show where I like to give the guests the opportunity to talk a little bit more about their journey to what led them to today. And by today, I don't necessarily mean today at this date, but how you ended up as a customer experience executive, and yeah, just what you're up to in your life. But this chance to really share anything you'd like.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, as I kind of reflect a little bit, this is an opportunity to sort of take a look back a little bit. My career path has been sort of a full circle to this point. So, like you, Jason, when I got out of college, I went to work right away. I got home from school and intended to sort of relax and put together a job search, but I came back home to my parents' house, and my parents were smart enough to tell me to, go the hell to work and not sit around and wait for something to happen. So I went to work in a retail store. What would be similar to a Target or a Walmart today. It was a large, discount store, um, and worked stocking shelves. And as I looked for a real job, I ended up working my way up through management in retail. And managed a TJ Maxx store in the busiest mall in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I didn't
As
know
my
that.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that about you, or maybe we had mentioned once, but it's been a long time. I didn't ever realize that you worked retail, because I
Yeah.
worked at Target. I worked at Target in
Yeah.
retail as well. Yeah.
And I think talking about how we raised our kids, I've made sure that each of my kids has had a customer facing retail type job, because I think it's important for young people to understand what it's like to be on that side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes out of my experience. So going back to trying to treat people the right way, or treat people how you want them to treat you, part of that comes from that. So I worked, the first 5 years or 3.5 to 4 years after college, I worked in straight retail. And I ran like a $40 million TJ Maxx store, which was just bananas with like 40 employees. And I was working 75 hours a week at the holidays, and 12-hour days. And it was just, as you know, from working in retail, it can be a very trying career path. So
Yeah.
when I had the opportunity, I answered an ad in a newspaper, a help wanted ad. It said, technology sales, and it paid, I don't even remember what, but I interviewed with a guy who had been a store manager in another retailer. And he's like, well, you're a smart enough guy. You've obviously got a great work ethic. I know you're going to go, if I tell you got to work Monday through Friday, you're going to work 12 hours a day to get your job done, and you'll still work half as much as you were in the retail store. And that's kind of how it worked out, So I went to work for that company who moved me to Minnesota. And then I worked for a number of large wireless carriers. And then again, saw, a LinkedIn ad. So, people there are times where sort of cold job prospecting can lead you to an opportunity. Although it certainly helps to know someone, but it said artificial intelligence and customer experience. And they were looking for a client executive. So after talking to 4 or 5 different people, I realized that it was an opportunity to expand, my talents and my knowledge base and my skill sets. And again, going back to the beginning of the discussion, trying to learn something new on a regular basis keeps all of us moving forward, I think. And it certainly excites me, and it's what makes me get out of bed every day. And over the last couple of years, now being at the other end of the spectrum, so helping retailers make their customers' experience with them, both online or in the stores, better. So, making it more frictionless for people to do business with large brands, has really been a neat way for me to leverage sort of all of the experiences I've gathered in the last 20 years or so. So,
yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, it's we won't talk about the company you work for, but I know that you guys make a big, as a consumer, it's likely that at some point here, most everybody listening and myself, we've probably interacted with somebody who's come in contact with I've either interacted with the artificial intelligence, or I've interacted with an actual person that has come from the company that you work for now. So very cool. And I was, excited when you decided to take on the software challenge, because I think the world it's all software now, right? Like there's obviously a lot of hardware out there. And I was just at Consumer Electronics Show last week, which is really, each year is less and less about the boxes that you buy and more about the software that you interface with. I think it's a good career move for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to stay in? Yeah. Do you think you'll stay in software the rest of your career?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see myself moving back over to the, moving boxes side of the house. This is where all of, consumer experience is going, right? So what a big part of what we do and what I do now is blending artificial intelligence with human intelligence, right? So to your point, you don't know if you're dealing with a person or a bot, right? Or a piece of artificial intelligence. And everything that you do going forward is going to be made better by some level of artificial intelligence, right? So every time you interact with someone or something over the internet or through a piece of technology, there's going to be this artificial piece of it. And it's going to improve the way people do their jobs and the way they live their lives, and take people away from doing things that can easily be taken over by a machine and move people into, doing higher end skill set type work, which is important, not only here, but globally. Right.
Yeah. And you're just you're teeing it up for me to make a customer service joke that I just have to relate to is, I think there's many times when I'd rather deal with a bot than a human being, and with certain companies, at least.
Oh, that's, you know what? And that's absolutely true. And yeah, we all have that experience. We all know the brands that are really hard to deal with, and we know the industries that are really hard to deal with. And if you can make that pivot as a brand to being easy to do business with, you win in your space, right? So people aren't going to differentiate with price and even, technology anymore. They're going to differentiate with customer experience. So yeah, there are plenty of customer service jokes, believe me.
I'm sure you've heard them all.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you find the companies that you are responsible for, do you find that as time goes on, and I think you've been, working in this industry now for a couple of years, at least a year and a half, are you finding the momentum quickly shifting where you're getting more and more senior executives are bought into the idea of customer service is actually a differentiator for us?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All industries, it really doesn't matter who you are, but let's use retail brick and mortar stores as an example, right? So the disruptive change in their industry due to web sales and e-commerce is as about as big a change as any particular industry could go through, right? I mean, I think there's statistics that tell you that there's 12,000 retail stores closed in the United States last year, right?
Wow.
So if you can't make this pivot and you can't make it in a way that's easy to do business with, you're not going to be around. And that's just the reality of it at this point, right? We all know who the big brands are that do it well, and the impact that they've had on other brick and mortar stores, really can't be overstated. And it's not about price. People don't buy on Amazon because of price. They buy on Amazon because it's easy and they know they'll get it tomorrow. So
yeah. I mentioned I was at CES last week, and what was interesting is Delta. So Delta Airlines had a massive booth there, and they were demonstrating almost all things were customer service related. There was one thing that was not, but one of the things that they talked about is how they view their app, and the experience of the customer service inside of the app is a real differentiator for them, and how they want to continue to have people be able to, if you think about how easy it is to buy a ticket now, I can pull up my phone and buy a ticket in 5 minutes. And then and then for them, they're using technology. So this is more about the artificial intelligence technology at the airport experience. So they're going to be launching something in Detroit around biometrics. So you walk in, and instead of having to go to the front desk or to the desk, they scan your face and scan your eyes. It's kind of the Minority Report thing that most of us have seen. And it will know who you are. And then you can drop your luggage. You can walk through security because they know who you are already. If you're on Clear or TSA PreCheck, you don't have to get anything from the agent. You'll just be able to walk right through. And then what I saw that I think you'll geek out about too, is something I nerded out about. They have this new technology of, I think they called it augmented reality monitors. So you and I can be standing right next to each other, looking at the same monitor, and I'm going to see the information appropriate to me, and you're going to see the information appropriate to you based on who you are. And they know who you are based on either retinal scanning or biometrics.
Yep. It's amazing.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And is there another industry that needs an improvement in the customer experience more than air travel, right? I mean, we all dread going to the airport. We all dread going through security. We all dread checking baggage. Every single piece of differentiated experience that they can deploy gains their market share and secures their place in the travel world. I know, if I remember right, I think, Jason, you and I went to the National Retail Federation show out in New York at one time. Yeah. Remember that? So I'm not going this year, but I've looked at the floor layout. So, 20 years ago, if you went to that, it was all about, how to present things on shelves in stores and, new technology for making the store experience easier to use or find. Well, today it's all, again, like you're talking about technology. It's all about, when someone walks in, if they're a member of your loyalty club, coupon, an immediate coupon gets delivered to their phone. If they walk by a certain area of the store, they'll see an advertisement for, diapers because they bought them the last time, right? So checkout on your phone, so you don't even have to go to self-checkout. You can scan things off your phone as you go through and pay, and just show your receipt on your phone before you leave. So all of the things that have been sticking points, right? So like at Delta, going to the counter, or in a retail store, going to a register, all of those sticking points are what, technology can be leveraged for today to make that consumer and customer experience better. And those are the things, again, that are exciting to see deployed and interesting to me to see how they can be leveraged to make people's lives easier, better experience.
Yeah. Well, we have just to wrap on this one, we have the Amazon stores here now. We have a few of those, one by Grand Central and one downtown. You walk in and you scan your phone. You go to the Amazon app, you pull up a 2D barcode, you walk in, you scan it, you grab your items, and you leave. That's it.
Yep. And you can do it you can do it at Sam's Club now. I mean, so
it's amazing.
Yeah. It's broadened very quickly, right? So you can walk through Sam's Club, scan everything on your phone, pay it with your saved credit card, and show them that barcode as you walk out, they scan it and off you go. It's amazing. Yep.
I think for people like you and I that are impatient by nature, this is I feel like we're actually a little too late to the game. Like, imagine what our kids are going to get to do. Like my daughter's almost 4. Like she'll be telling me these things. I'll be like, man, I'll be like, back in my day, you had to go to the store and talk to a register and hand them cash. Yeah, what's this cash thing?
Yeah. What's a register? Yeah, that's exactly right. Or going to McDonald's and you had to stand in line and wait to order your French fries, where now you walk in and press a button on a kiosk. And that's really it. That's again, taking away these sticking points, as well as taking away these lower end employment jobs. I know a lot of people are scared, saying, "Oh, a machine's going to replace me." Well, it's going to happen inevitably anyway if the job you're doing can be done. So it'll push people to take higher skilled jobs that are better pay, right? Which is what we want. You want better paying jobs for more people. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing all that. Yeah, you've had a super cool journey in your career, from selling pagers and working at TJ Maxx to supporting some of the largest companies in the world and changing the way they do business. So thanks for sharing all that. So Shaun, this is the part of the show where you get to be the host, and we're going to do a little Jason Ask AMA. So ask me anything. So Shaun, what would you like for me to talk about, or what would you like to ask me that I can answer?
So you may have talked about it before, but I guess I would like to know, and what I think would be interesting to share, the decision-making process around moving from Minnesota to New York.
Yes.
What made that something that you wanted to do? And then talk about the tactical part of how you actually made it happen.
It's so funny that you bring this up. This is perfect timing. I actually did on Instagram last week. I did a mini post about this because I was at CES, and I don't know if you saw that post or not, but I'll make this I'll make this a pretty quick story. So most of the audience knows, if you've listened to an episode before, I'm originally from Minnesota, and I was born in Arkansas, moved to Minnesota when I was 6 months old. So I call myself a Minnesotan, and I lived in Minnesota until I was 27. So I think, Shaun, the way it started for me was I went out and visited my friend Anne in New York. She had moved out to New York City to pursue an acting career, and then her boyfriend had followed her out and moved out, and I was good friends with both of them. And I'll never forget, I think it was New Year's Eve of, I believe, 2003, actually, where I decided to come visit them. And I had never been to New York City before. This is like, I was at the time 25 years old and never been to New York City. And I remember, so when you fly into New York City, especially to LaGuardia, you fly in, you'll fly north into LaGuardia, and then you'll do a 180 and land. So what you generally will get, if you're on the left side of the aircraft, is you will see the skyline of Manhattan at night. And I remember this very clearly. And we landed, and I'm like, whoa, I'm in New York. And I was like, it's pretty overwhelming for those who haven't been here. You land, and there's like a lot going on as soon as you land. Even more so at LaGuardia now, when they've been doing like 5 years of crazy construction. But you land, you catch a cab, and my friend Ann, she lived at Houston and Sullivan, which is right in Soho. It's a really cool neighborhood. And I will never forget, the cab pulls over, and I get out, and I step on the ground, and I'm like, I'm moving here. Like, it was really that simple. Like, this is what I want. I didn't know why. I didn't know. Well, I kind of knew why, but I didn't know specifically why. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how, but I just knew I was going to do it. Which, looking back, is not generally a way I operated in life. So it was a weird thing for me to be like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. And then it took me another, and I think you know a little bit about the story. At that point, I had started to think about the how and the logistics of it, the tactical part of it. And and then my grandmother got sick, and she was living in Minnesota at the time. So I put it on hold for a little bit. Then I met a girl, which is always a wrench in the plans for a little bit. And then in 2004, I realized again, I'm like, I need to make this happen. I'm just not happy here. And it wasn't like a family thing. It wasn't a friends thing. I had lots of friends. It wasn't a work thing. I like my job. It was like a calling. I don't know. And I never really felt that before. Like, some people have callings for professions, or go and do missionary work, or go and do nonprofit work. I never had any of those callings, but I just had this call. I'm like, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in New York City. I didn't know why. So tactically, I went to my boss and I said, I would like to transfer to New York. And there was actually an opening at the time. And there was some politics involved. And as you remember, this is also about the same time that it was announced that Sprint and Nextel were going to be merging. So you had this whole, for those who worked in corporate environments, like when a merger is happening or being announced, like that kind of throws everything up in the air and everything up into chaos. And so this is what I posted about last week. I'll never forget in January of 2005, it was like January 6th. CES is the same week every year. It's the first full week in January. I was standing in line waiting for my badge, and I got a call from my boss, and he's like, "Hey, I just heard from our VP. You're approved to move." And I was like, "Whoa, like this is real. Like now that I put this out there, now that I've said I want to do this, and now they've said yes, like I don't have a choice. Like I got to go do this thing." So I was in CES for a few days there, and then I came home, and in the space of about 2.5 months, I sold my townhouse. I booked the movers, came out to New York, found an apartment in New York the month before, came back home, packed everything up, did my thing, did Easter with my family, with all my grandparents were still alive at the time. Like, like it was actually the Sunday was Easter Sunday. And then I moved the next day. So I flew to New York the next day, and I'll never forget. So that's how I did it. And looking back, I'm not really sure how I did it, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't seem like something that was really able to be pulled off in 3 months, but I kind of did it just from, I don't know if you ever had this happen to you, but like you just pull something off and you're like, I'm not sure how I just did that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. You're like every day.
Moving out here to a place we didn't know anybody. Believe me, I felt the same way. But you did it purposefully, and that's why I wanted you to kind of go through the process.
Yeah. Well, and just to wrap on this, and thank you for asking it, because I've never really talked about this on the show before, but it was like such a stereotypical New York thing where I moved and I landed and I'm like, okay, I'm here. I've got my apartment, and I'm sitting empty in my apartment on the Upper East Side. And I had my friends Ann and Chad who had lived close by, and I get a call from the movers. They're like, "Hey, yeah, we can't get your stuff." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, it's on a truck out in Long Island, but we didn't realize you can't bring full-size semi-trucks into Manhattan." I'm like, "You're a moving company and you don't realize you can't bring an 18-wheeler into Manhattan." So they had to like go to a depot, unload all my stuff. Then we're talking like bed, couch, everything you'd have for an apartment. And they had to transfer to a smaller truck that it could actually come across the bridges here, because, like you can't have semi-trucks in Manhattan. Right. And so it was going to be delayed by 3 days. And so, of course, I'm like sitting in my apartment, like on the ground with nothing. Like I had nothing. I had a backpack with some clothes. And I was just like, this is the most New York thing that's possible. So I'm sitting in my new apartment. Yep. It's dusty. It's old. And I'm sitting there with absolutely nothing. I'm talking to my boss, and we're actually doing like a regular old one-on-one. And I'm like, just so you know, I'm sitting in my apartment with my laptop with no Wi-Fi. I'm by myself. He's like, cool. And then I ended up going and staying with Ann and Chad for a couple of days. And then, finally the movers came. I think they only broke one thing. And then I moved in, and the rest is history. And I've been here, I'm coming up on 15 years. So it'll be 15 years at the end of March, which is, it's also seems insane that I've lived in New York for 15 years.
That's crazy. The only other part of the story that you left out was the fact that you were supposed to leave me the automobile that you had here in Minnesota for use while after you left, but you did not do that. So you didn't. Oh my God! you didn't include that totally, part of the story, but
oh yeah, I'll include that in the story because yes. So I had a Mazda RX-8. If you know what that is, it's a rear-wheel drive. It's a lot of fun. It's a little kind of like cheap sports car. Pretty much the worst car you could ever have in Minnesota in the winter. Like it's basically like a hockey puck on ice. Yep. And I was on a lease with it, and because I got it the year before. And so if you've ever had a lease, like you can't really get out of them. I think you can now. There's a lot of kind of like swap a lease and all these other systems, like like sharing economy. You can do. Back then you couldn't. So I was stuck with I think it was $500 a month, $500 a month car payment for 2.5 more years while in New York City, which is not ideal because New York City is very expensive. So I'm like, each month I'm literally just bleeding off money. and you have to keep it insured. So I'm paying insurance and lease. So it must have cost me $700 a month. And I'm like, man, I could use that money now, but man, back then when I was 27 years old, living in New York City, I could have really used another $700 a month. So yes, thank you for reminding me that. I think I blocked that out of my mind as a.
And really hard to believe that my wife at the time discouraged me from taking on your lease payments and driving that car around Minnesota, which literally was the worst possible automobile to have living here with 3 kids like under the age of 5 at the time, right?
And there's no way their car seats would have fit in that car. There's no way.
No. They would have been completely useless for anything utilitarian at the time for my family. But boy, I really wanted that car. I wasn't able to quite pull that off.
Man, I have totally forgotten about the old RX-8. Thank you for reminding me. That's hilarious.
Yeah, sorry to bring up that painful part of the move, but
no, I like it. I'll just say one thing. I like the juxtaposition of the story as well. Of like, hey, you made this really powerful decision to move to New York City, and it's been really great. And then you also were an idiot with the kind of car you got.
Well, but it just goes to show that, if there's something you want to do bad enough, you can make it work, right? And I think for a lot of people, you can always find a reason not to do something, right? So, that car might have been a reason not to do it at the time, but you did it, you stuck with it, and it's worked out, tremendously well for you personally and professionally. So,
well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Sometimes you just got to do it because you think it's the right thing to do it.
Yeah. And I trust in my gut, which I was never much of a gut person. I think as I'm getting older, I'm actually trusting myself more, but there's one time where I'm just like, this is what I got to do. And I just went and did it. So
very cool.
All right. Enough about me. You're on the hot seat again. This is too much me in the hot seat. Good question though, Shaun. I appreciate it. So, Shaun, what are you passionate about besides music and your family?
Those are the main.
Take those off the table.
Yeah, I mean, those are really the main things, right? So I'm not an overly complicated person. I think those are my passions. As my kids grew up, I was involved in a lot of their different activities. I served on different board positions. I coached hockey for many years, many seasons as my kids grew up, and I can't skate. So, don't let an obstacle be put in your way. And I think I was a really good hockey coach, quite frankly. The fact that I could barely skate didn't really stand in my way. I enjoy sports. I enjoy spending time with my friends and with my family and doing things. A lot of it's centered around what we talked about, either live music or sports. My golf game slowly, steadily improving now that I have more time, obviously, as my kids have gotten a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are it. There's not outside of work and outside of my family. I don't have a huge amount of things that I have time for at this point. But being able to blend professionally sort of this idea of customer experience and treating people with respect and making people's experience valuable, that sort of all blends together, right? And those are the things I'm pretty passionate about.
Yeah, that's cool. And one thing that I think you've got that's a little bit different from especially out here on the East Coast is all 3 of your children go to school in Minnesota, or when one's graduated, they all went to school in Minnesota. So you still have a ton of family time.
Yeah,
and a ton of laundry to do too.
Yeah, like we talked about, when we moved from New Jersey to Minnesota, we didn't know anybody here, right? So we don't have any cousins, grandparents, anybody within, 1,000 miles, frankly, right? So we used to have to fly grandparents in if we ever wanted to leave the state. You and half of your family babysat kids for us so that we could go out and have a dinner for a while, right? Your sister as much as anything. But that's caused us to be sort of a close-knit family unit of 5. And we do still do stuff. My wife and I, Terry and I joke, did we do a good job with our kids or a bad job with our kids? The fact that none of them went to college more than 20 miles away, right? Where actually she and I both went, like 400 miles away to go to college. But, the schools that my kids chose, they chose for the right reasons. Where they were wasn't necessarily the number one determining factor. It was more about, the education it offered and the experience it offered. So, I would like to think that I've empowered my kids to do something like what you've done, or even what
Mm-hmm.
we did in moving halfway across the country when it makes sense.
Yeah.
But we'll find out more as they get a little older here. But right now,
Yeah.
everybody's close.
Yeah. Well, and I also say that I believe that both your two sons have chosen the best school in the country to go to. So
I suspected you might. Yep,
yeah.
I suspected you might. My two kids and a lot of my money go to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. So,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's a
Probably. Yeah.
really good school, which not a lot of people outside of Upper Midwest probably realize, but it is a very good school.
And final AP rankings came out today. Number 10, highest. I believe it's the highest the Gophers have been ranked since the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, like 1962, which is bananas. Yeah. So part of the determining factor for them to go there was, big sports school, Big Ten football, all of those things, and now they actually get to experience meaningful football games for the first time in a long time.
Finally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting.
As you know, my wife, and I think I've talked about this in the show before. My wife went to Ohio State, so I married into a huge football thing. Ohio State is good every single year, and finally, and they actually almost had a chance to play the Buckeyes, but they couldn't quite beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. So, or in the Conference East or Conference West. But anyway, enough about that. So cool. So Shaun, and we've talked a lot about the things you're up to, the things you've done, the things you're still doing. What's the thing that you're most proud of in all of this?
On a personal level, I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to adapt, right? So I graduated with an English literature degree, right? I didn't know what I was going to do after college. I don't have a technology degree background. It's funny, both, my father and my brother are extremely hardcore technologists, right? Or, my father was before he passed away. I was always sort of the non-tech guy in our house. And the fact that I've made, my living and supported my family for a long time, working in technology, selling technology, managing relationships between technology companies and large brands. I'm very proud of the fact that I've been able to do that, right? And do things along the way that, improve people's experience or improve their lives through technology, and had a wide variety of different relationships with companies that do that. When I think about some of the deployments that you and I worked on, or I worked on after Nextel, I've done things where power companies manage their electric grid remotely over wireless. I've done things where correction agencies monitor people under home arrest remotely. I've done things where large brands institute a bot on their website to make the experience better. It's a constantly evolving environment, and the idea of doing the same thing every day for any length of time would drive me bananas very quickly. So I'm proud that I've been able to adapt and change as the world has changed, and continue to have success in that environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome. And then what about, you said professionally, what about in your personal life?
Yeah. So that's easy, right? So I think anybody that's a parent, the thing that you're most proud of is your kids, and the fact that all three of my kids, as they reach adulthood, are good people. They're productive people. They're kind people. They're goal oriented, but not in a way that's to the detriment of anybody else. There's no better reflection of you as a person than how your children are, right? So I know you know them a little bit, and I know you've been very complimentary of them, which I appreciate. But I would like to think that somebody that interacts with my children as they go forward, whether they know me or not, would have that same impression. So that's that's pretty easy.
That's awesome. All right, we're getting near the end of the time, but I have a few more questions for you if you've got the time for us.
Yeah, of course.
So, question back to you. What's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure that I have a canned response. Maybe something I'm afraid as I'm getting older is that I'm getting a little softer, right? So you mentioned, you live in New York now, so you get to be sarcastic and, sometimes a little bitter towards the outer world. I flip flopped. I came from Philadelphia and now live in Minnesota. So it might be true that I've over time become Minnesota nice as I'm getting a little older. So I might be afraid that that's true.
Yeah. And then the second part of the question, which you don't have ahead of time, I always like to surprise people with this one, is what do you do to compensate for that?
I don't, half kidding, right? But I don't have to compensate it. As you get a little bit of experience, you start to learn that you don't actually know everything, even though you think you do. And sometimes it's okay to be wrong or learn or let somebody else take the lead, right?
Yeah.
I think that's being a little bit more well-rounded as an individual and how you interact with everybody else in the world.
Yeah, I have to mention something. It's pretty funny. There's another episode. I'm actually releasing it this Thursday with Marie DeVoe, and she asked me about. So she was born in San Jose, and then moved to go to school here at NYU, and she was 18 and has lived here ever since, and she lives in Brooklyn now. So her question to me was like, I want to know about Midwestern nice. So I had to give her my spiel on Midwestern and Minnesota nice. So listen to that episode, and you'll hear my perspective on what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I'll check that out. The one good Minnesota joke about Minnesota nice I've always heard is, a Minnesotan will give you directions to anywhere but their house. So, it's a little of that passive aggressive.
I've never heard that. Right? I've never heard that. And I love that. That's great.
Isn't that perfect? Yeah, that's perfect.
I'll do anything for you as long as it doesn't require me actually being hospitable inside my own premises. Exactly. I love that. I've never heard that. I'm going to use that.
I'll fake pretend to be nice to you all day, but if I actually have to do something, probably not. Yep. And Minnesotans are the worst. Minnesotans are possibly the worst drivers in the country.
I think that's pretty spot on. I agree with that. So Shaun, wrapping up here for today, you've kind of weaved this in and out of the conversation, but I'd love if you could summarize for me and for the audience, what is your general philosophy on how you operate in life?
Yeah, you're right. I have woven in and out. It's treat others as you would want to be treated, right? So, I believe a little bit in karma, right? So anything you do, good or bad, is probably going to come back around to you, based on my experience. So whether that's personally or professionally, whether that's with a coworker or a client, if you treat people or take advantage of situations, it's probably going to end up coming back around you. And vice versa, whatever you do, positively or negatively. But if you do things the right way, that's going to reward you for that. And I try and embody that professionally and personally, and I try to instill that in my kids because I really do think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. One of the things that I've learned about, I didn't learn about, but one of the things through my coaching program that I'm wrapping up is integrity. Your integrity is really all you got at the end of the day. Like your word, your commitment, the things you declare you're going to do, the things you do. And, like Hannah's a little too young for that, but even now at almost 4, like when she promises us something, we really try and hold her to it at the best of our ability and we call it being in integrity with, I think it was Gandhi, I believe it was Gandhi said your being in integrity is I might get this wrong. You think it and then you say it and then you actually do it.
Yeah.
It's like your word. It's like your word, your action, your words and your actions. Your words are not enough. It's your words plus your actions that actually creates your integrity.
That's absolutely right. And, in the professional environment, it's really surprising how many people don't embody that. Right. So people that don't follow up on what they've committed to or overcommit to things that they're not actually able to. And that, it makes everyone's job or everyone's experience more difficult because people aren't, holding themselves accountable for that. And I've tried throughout my career, whether it's been when I was managing people or whether it's been as an individual contributor on behalf of clients, to really try and hold myself to that standard. And when I'm able to do it successfully is when I have the most success professionally and personally.
Yeah. You always give it your all, even
Yep.
even in the world of fantasy football, which we won't get too much into today. But
Please let's not.
Sean and I have been in a fantasy football league for years, but now his two of his sons are in it. It hasn't gone all that well for any of us the last few years. So maybe we need to brainstorm on a new strategy.
Yeah, I'll just throw it out there. I had probably my worst year ever. I started 0-6, I think, and I ended up with 2 wins, which you almost have to try not to win. And the only win, the win that I had at the end of the year knocked one of my kids out of the playoffs, which, eliminated any opportunity for me to recoup any financial investment in the league. So that was just about as bad as it could go.
Well, the other person you beat was me, and because of me losing, I missed the playoffs by 1 game as well. So thank you for knocking myself and your son out of the playoffs. It's great.
Yeah, I am the fantasy cooler. So yeah, if there's somebody on a team that you don't like, let me know who it is, and I'll put them on my team, and I promise you they'll do bad. So it's like magic.
Oh my God. Well, maybe next year once we draft, we'll post your draft online and people can see who you've got so they can be sure not to draft them.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the people in Green Bay don't know that a couple of years ago when Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone, it's because I had him on my team. So, it works.
It works. It is. You're like the Madden curse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Madden cover or Newkirk's fantasy team, either one, it'll do the trick.
Well, good. Well, Shaun, I want to thank you for the time today. I've just got a couple more things for you. So, I like to always come back around and see if there's anything else that we've been talking about that struck you or anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up for today.
No, I don't think so. I've just appreciated the conversation and the opportunity to sort of talk about why I do things that I do and how I do things that I do and what's important to me and how that's reflected in what you're doing. And our personal history together reflects a lot of that as well. So yeah, no, I think it's been a great conversation.
Cool. And last thing, I'm going to give you a Post-it note, and shout out to Minnesota. Post-it notes are made by 3M, who you and I have both, called on in the past. So absolutely. I give you a Post-it note, and you get to write words of wisdom that the audience gets to take with them. What would you want to leave the audience with today?
I wish I had a great joke to insert here, but I don't, right? So I'll probably just stick with the same theme that we've talked about, right? So just, treat others how you want to be treated. Damn it. Maybe put that at the end, right? So I think that's probably as good as I can get right now.
I like it. It's kind of a combination of Minnesota nice coupled with a little bit of East Coast toot at the end of it. It's perfect.
Exactly. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shaun. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. And I wish you the very best in everything that you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.